we'll just jump right in here, guys. Before we kind of talk about what Cosmos has done right with DeFi, I want to talk about what are the friction points and what are the weak points right now in Cosmos DeFi, in your guys' opinions. And we'll kick things off. Sunny, if you want to kick us off.
Hey, yeah, thanks for having me. Biggest weak points or pain points? I would say right now, like I think getting a lot of like IBC composability is like it's in the process right now. Like there is being able to do a leverage loop between Osmosis and Umee, let's say, right? Like this is it's a little bit challenging right now, and like there's a lot of work being done right now that it will like hopefully get resolved very quickly, probably in the next couple of months. But like I think right now that's like a pretty friction point where like users have to do like these transactions. There's not like an Insta DApp or like Zapper or something for the Cosmos ecosystem that sort of like handles those like more complex flows. On top of that, I'd also just say that like I think like there's a lot of dexes right now in the Osmosis ecosystem, but like still not a lot of like I think dexes have gotten a bit of product market fit so far, but still like lending protocol, like all the other DeFi primitives that you would expect, right? Like lending protocols, perps, options, like stable coins. Like these are, well, I guess there was a stable coin that had a lot of product market fit until it didn't. But so there's a lot of like DeFi primitives that are still yet to like achieve like huge product market fit right now, and I think that they're starting to come about in recent months.
Anyone else want to hop in here? Biggest friction points in your mind in Cosmos right now?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest friction point is the same case for most of the new ecosystems, or anything that kind of slightly deviates from the existing, kind of like the EVM framework or the assumption that DeFi sits only within EVM. And if you think about it, that's that makes a lot of sense because 90% of the chains out there are EVM or just some form of exclusively EVM chain or network. The only other one that I can think of that's somewhat unique that deviates from Cosmos SDK would be Solana. And essentially all those mindshare, all those integrations, all those existing work and all those like industry participants and institutional participants are all extremely accustomed and spend the time and process to integrate with existing EVM solutions, and it's basically a plug and play for any type of new ecosystem. Obviously, FMOS did a really great job to make sure that that kind of process is kind of bridged over in like the seamless way, but it's still somewhat of a long way to go to get kind of the full exposure to the greater Cosmos ecosystem, given how unique every single ecosystem and every single chain within Cosmos is. And I think on top of that, it would be kind of like the general composability and getting people more used to the fact that it doesn't have to be intra-block atomicity and composability. It could be, interchain and inter-block in a sense, and really shifting the mindset because everything, everyone here on the panel and everyone within the Cosmos ecosystem, everything that they're working on is a fundamental paradigm shift compared to, what all the dApps within the Ethereum ecosystem or EVM related ecosystems are working on, and it's going to take a while for everyone to wrap their heads around it.
Yeah, first of all, thank you so much for inviting me here. I feel very fortunate to be alongside you guys. Sunny, Eric, Brent, Carter is a very kind of new entrant into the ecosystem and a really new project. I think kind of how I completely agree with everything that y'all said, Sunny and Eric, and I think just to kind of add my 2 cents, right? Like Cosmos and app chain thesis in the kind of app chain direction is a completely zero to one innovation in how we think about kind of blockchain infrastructure and building these types of applications. And so, the types of applications that come in and need to be built, we still haven't even gotten to like the table stakes, lowest hanging fruit in kind of Cosmos and IBC. And so we're really pumped to kind of, Sunny, you mentioned the things that are coming to IBC over the next few months that are going to be huge unlocks that will actually enable these types of kind of, app chain native DeFi applications, building more types of applications that are, not just the kind of the basic exchanges, but also other types of kind of basic DeFi primitives. we're also kind of have been very fortunate on our end. We've been very warmly welcomed into Cosmos, and we're really grateful for it. And really hope that over time, kind of all of our projects and other projects in Cosmos can lock arms and really kind of fight these fights together with more collaboration.
Yeah, and great to be here as well, guys. I have three quick ones. First one is I don't think we have a good solution for flash loans yet. So I think Sunny referenced that earlier. There's no way to composably, transact between a borrowing and lending protocol with a DEX and then close that loop. Flash loans are particularly hard in Cosmos because every loan would have an IBC transfer in between, and you'd have multiple IBC hops. So this is a challenge. The second thing is we need a better Oracle system in Cosmos. We're working a little bit on that. And third is I just think that IBC adoption could be stronger. Like for Cosmos DeFi to become really, really cool, we need to use IBC to connect with like Ethereum, Polygon, Polkadot, Near, Avalanche. And so I think those are some weak points, and we could definitely work on those.
It's a great summary. The composability of it all, the baseline infrastructure, some of the key primitives, all of these things will continue to improve and need to continue to improve. So we started with friction points. Now I want to pivot to what do we think Cosmos is doing really, really well right now that differentiates it from a lot of the other EVM chains out there, all the other L1s out there, specifically with DeFi. And I'll open this up to anyone to kick us off on this one.
I mean, I'll go ahead and say like kind of the opposite of what almost contrary to what I said it was a con is I actually think we are the farthest along in actually building cross-chain composability, right? Like if you have, this whole multi-chain world that we've been pushing for a long time is starting to come true in everywhere else, right? You have the proliferation of rollups and stuff, but like there's still actually a severe lack of actual composability right now anywhere else, right? And I think that and I feel there's been a lack of actually even like focus and building towards that. Every roll up on Ethereum is trying to build its own little internal ecosystem, which actually ends up not actually making anything any more scalable, because then you just have the same issues that every roll up just has the same sort of issues. And so we are, CosmWasm has enabled us to like a lot of the interchain composability stuff that's being built right now. I think we're going to start to see it come live like pretty soon, right? Like Osmosis, we just finished our cross-chain swaps contracts, which like allow people to take tokens on any chain and swap them using Osmosis liquidity. So we'll be like deploying this on like other chains. Or you see like, Mars building how they're building the outpost model for their lending systems. So yeah, I think like a lot of Cosmos DeFi applications are being built with like cross-chain focus first. So I think that's what's going to make them succeed in the long term.
I'll just add on to that if that's okay. Completely agree with everything that you were saying, Sunny. And I think in many ways, like Cosmos for many years now has been skating to where the puck is going. Right. I think a lot of other ecosystems have been very short-sighted in their view and just not created for scalability of where the world is headed. And Cosmos is now, from a DeFi application angle, we need to catch up in terms of just getting the basic primitives up and running, which is fine. And we'll do that. And we're doing that. Right. But from a kind of a fundamental infrastructure that can actually get to 1 billion users over time, we are light years ahead. And we're moving at lightning speeds, right? Even to think about how recently IBC was even a basic commercialized message passing protocol and where it's come so far, and what's coming up over the next 6-12 months is like ridiculous to think about. And so we're really, really pumped for that for the future. And I think the other thing that we're seeing is, as other larger players are starting to realize that app-specific infrastructure is the future of how blockchains and applications are going to be built, we're starting to see experimentation around that, right? When these types of larger players can start to, projects can start to experiment with what does it mean to control sequencing? What does it mean to control consensus? What does it mean to control MEV within your own application? You start to see some like really crazy possibilities that we're just starting to like, to hit and experience, which is awesome.
The other thing I'd also add,
I think. You go ahead.
I was just gonna say the other thing I would also add is also I think like the privacy focus in Cosmos, I think, is actually a big deal. Like, I tell people that dexes are actually like most, or like even Osmosis and most dexes today are like very uncompetitive with centralized exchanges, because there's like, we have worse privacy than you'd have on a centralized exchange, whether that's at the mempool layer with all the front running that's possible, or even the fact that I can look at any like account and see like every trade that an account makes, right? This is like worse than centralized exchanges. And so I think that like, I wouldn't say all privacy stuff is being done in Cosmos, but I would say a good majority of like major privacy projects choose to build on like in Cosmos, right? Whether that's like Secret or Penumbra, Anoma, like NIM, even Zcash is working on like Cosmos SDK stuff, like Cosmos stuff now. Osmosis, we've been working a lot of like the threshold decryption. So yeah, I think that like the more customizable stack, I think like the customizable stack that the Cosmos SDK gives you is like really powerful. And one of the most interesting ways to use that is that you actually get a chance to experiment with new cryptography, right? And that's something it's really hard to do without the customizability that the Cosmos SDK gives you.
Thanks for bringing that up,
Yeah.
Sunny. In the spirit of this being kind of a secret summit, super appreciate that. And copycat trading as a whole conceptually is very odd when people are trying to generate delta on a lot of their trades. So it's we'll see how that continues to evolve over time. Eric, I know you wanted to hop in here.
Yeah, I think I just wanted to extend on like one point that's kind of this like hidden huge benefit of building on top of Cosmos, and basically this thing that's like becoming like more and more painfully obvious to every single ecosystem participant, and those who are building on app chains, sector specific chains, and also anyone participating, is that you just have a fundamentally aligned base layer infrastructure and malleability on the base layer and on a consensus level, and on just overall the entire stack. And I think like a great example is that when Frontrunner who recently raised like I think 4.75 mil for their seed round, was looking for kind of like solutions to build out their sports betting platform. They were basically they just have like a few benchmarks, and they couldn't really be satisfied with all the existing solution, like generalized environments and monolithic environments. And they were actually faced with the exact same set of limitations that we were faced back in like 2018 or 2019. And essentially, they just found the injective ecosystem by the virtue of exploring solutions. And I think more and more there's obviously more and more cases of that as the overall like greater Cosmos ecosystem grows, and removing the fundamental limitations of any type of feature offering, value prop to the general Web3 users. I think that is the most fundamental driver for the growth of Cosmos ecosystem, and in this case specifically DeFi.
Yeah, and I'll throw in my 2 cents here. Like if you look at platforms like Compound and Aave, whenever they come out with a new version, they have to they can't really do a smart contract upgrade. Their smart contract is already codified in the Ethereum blockchain, and so they have to come out with a new version of like Compound and Aave. And what it does is it splits up liquidity. It basically has liquidity on Aave v2, Aave v3, Compound v2, Compound v3. What's great about Cosmos is that whenever we do chain upgrades, part of it is the chain itself is dedicated to the application. And so it just creates a lot more customizability, and you're able to just add so much new functionality to a chain without having to split up liquidity. It's kind of a limitation of Ethereum smart contracts, and it's definitely an advantage of Cosmos. So I think that's something that we're doing really well.
Brent, I completely agree. I come from Web 2 world, and like you can actually ship in a continuous manner and continue to upgrade and add your add functionality, add features to your application as time goes on in a way that is much more natural and develop in kind of application in infrastructure and ecosystem development life cycles, which is kind of a really, really exciting thing to introduce.
Some wonderful answers all around. I now want to kind of pivot us to what I consider maybe more cutting edge features of the Cosmos, specifically staking derivatives and interchain security. Now, the reason I bring up staking derivatives is because Cosmos is essentially spinning up dozens and dozens and dozens of proof of stake chains. And so staking derivatives are this really interesting type of primitive that maps out on top of all these different, layer one chains. And then interchain security conceptually is a very new concept. And so I kind of just want to talk about as a whole, what is the role of interchain security and staking derivatives in the Cosmos? Where do you see things headed? What's the relationship between the two? Really just want to open the floor to navigating these two very unique components that I think Cosmos is way ahead of the game in many ways compared to other ecosystems. And just want to know your guys' projection on their impact within DeFi and Cosmos.
Yeah, I mean, I've been thinking a lot about staking derivatives. I mean, I think one of the biggest things that I'm like mostly sort of concerned about right now is like how to mitigate the like negative impacts of leverage staking, right? Like I think leverage staking is actually pretty harmful and like has a lot of like tail end risks that people don't account for until they get really screwed. And like, we saw this happen on Solend recently when Solana's market was crashing. And like, basically, I think like Solana, like DeFi could have been like almost wiped out if it wasn't for like an altruistic whale that had to step up and like sort of like plug the gap there. And like, arguably a lot of even the whole Bitcoin, the last 2 years of bull market was built off of this like not leverage staking, but this like leverage GBTC like strategy. And so I think like figure working with lending protocols and like making sure that we account for we figure out how to like make like it seems to me like it's hard to make sure like to stop staking derivatives from existing. So I think the next best thing is like, okay, working with lending protocols and stuff to make sure that like we don't enable this sort of like risky behavior. And like, so yeah, that's kind of my biggest concern right now.
I think if you apply like a liquidity discount to staking derivatives, like let's say like ST Atom versus Atom itself, that problem is probably going to be discounted by like at least 60% plus.
Yeah, I think the key to doing leverage staking right, at least in the safe way, is definitely applying that discount and just but the other is just having the right risk metrics. I'm sure like there's a leverage staking protocol out there where maybe the value of the staking derivative was hard coded based on like some standard deviation to the actual asset, but that creates lots of safety issues. Basically, you need like a really good oracle to track the price of whatever staking derivative you're using, so that if the staking derivative something goes wrong, it gets infinitely minted, like that BNB situation with Anchor Protocol, or the price goes out of whack. Then there needs to be a way to successfully track that and optimize your leverage. But I agree, staking derivatives are definitely a tricky innovation, depending on how they're built, but the right risk metrics are definitely necessary to make sure they're done correctly.
I'll maybe pivot over to the kind of shared security models, interchain security. Right. So, Duality is going to be launching on interchain security in Q1, which we're really excited about. And I think that how we view these innovations is, new chains want to focus on building product that unlocks the potential of app specific infrastructure without the need to focus on kind of bootstrapping an entire security network from day zero. And so, interchain security as a specific example is a really good solution for chains like ours. But we also know that there's going to be a lot of models that try to do this in different ways, right? We're really excited about mesh security and what the possibilities that engages, and also like new and kind of different projects that are also chugging along with different approaches towards similar goals, like Celestia and like Eigenlayer and like Babylon. And so we're really kind of excited to be a part of that. But I think at the very base level, to kind of bring a bunch more projects into the ecosystem, not every single project should need to worry about bootstrapping security from day zero.
Would anyone else like to comment on interchain security and the future it might play?
Yeah, I mean, I think that like shared security models are important. That's how app chains are gonna compete with there's a lot of benefits to app chains, but the main con that everyone always brings up is like, oh, how are they going to secure themselves relative to like you need this like L1 security, and so the answer is like mesh security and other shared security models where the sum of all app chains is going to be able to secure. If you look at, you don't need to have a base moneyness system to make your system secure. Actually, like the sum of the top 10 market cap like stocks is higher than the market cap of gold. And so it's like, you could actually have economic security through app chains that's actually higher than you would through this like more L1 moneyness style scheme.
That's fascinating. I've never heard of the concept that security can outpace those traditional models, and it makes total sense. That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
So the next question I have here, which is Secret Summit, of course, is what is the role of privacy in DeFi? It's kind of your opportunity to talk about maybe the negative effects of total transparency that you've seen and the role that you see privacy playing in the future. Sunny, I know you touched on some of this earlier, but just kind of opening that up for everyone to jump in on.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna say that for us, the biggest thing that we saw, like almost basically like the inspiration for building Osmosis was to like bring privacy to the mempool, because that was like the biggest source of like privacy leakage with like active, like ongoing high levels of harm that we saw. And so, that's why we sort of spent a while just like thinking through different solutions, and kind of came to the conclusion that like SGX based system, no, sorry, threshold decryption based systems are like the way to go, especially when combined with like the Tendermint consensus protocol. It gives a lot of properties that like, a lot of pros without many cons. And so, so that's been our one of our big focuses. But then obviously like just working on other forms of like privacy stuff as well. Like there was a team that was building called Void that was building like sort of a shielded system on top of Osmosis. They got spooked after Tornado Cash, so they kind of like stopped working on it now. But like we're working with like the Nomada team is like launching sort of part of their whole go to market is going to be doing private swaps on Osmosis. So like you can have like keep assets on the Nomada chain, and then when you want to do a swap, it will like send it over IBC, do the swap, and then send it back into an account on the Nomada chain. So that's like sort of another that kind of prevents a lot of that copy trading and stuff that we talked about earlier.
Yeah, that's really cool on the trading side. I think private transactions are just going to be one of the biggest innovations when it comes to swapping assets. And I want to say that the reason why Celsius, BlockFi, Voyager, Nexo, Vault, all of these centralized borrowing and lending protocols exist really is the privacy aspect. It's that you can borrow and lend using a private centralized system. Of course, the double-edged sword is that the centralized systems could rehypothecate your assets, and they could lend them to SBF and Therios Capital, which is definitely a bad thing. I think the key to doing borrowing and lending right, so we're in the borrowing and lending space, is to be able to have the right proof of reserves, but also being able to have the right privacy preserving tools to ensure that not everyone can see what you're doing. Because borrowing and lending is a tricky business. It's like no one really wants to let everyone know their positions because it's technically very private information. And so I think the future of DeFi is basically having, some sort of loan specific chains that just handle purely borrowing and lending that have a privacy preserving aspect. So we don't need to use the FTXs or BlockFis or the Celsius of the world anymore. We can just use this direct on-chain solution that has some sort of proof of reserve and some sort of privacy preserving aspect to ensure that, you can borrow and lend very safely without having to deal with people rehypothecating your funds and buying mansions in the Bahamas and stuff.
Yeah, completely. completely agree with that. And so I kind of view privacy in crypto in two ways, right? One is exactly what you were talking about, Brent, which is it's kind of the biggest unlock to reach mass adoption, right? You can't just end up having a financial reality where just everyone's transactions are completely open, right? It doesn't work. On the individual level, on the institutional level, for individual players that are competing in these ecosystems, it doesn't work. And the second thing, which is kind of Sunny, building off what you were saying earlier, this lack of privacy also leads to just unfavorable economic setups and conditions, where you have situations where more sophisticated players can go and attack less sophisticated players in certain ways at the mempool, at different layers of the stack, in ways that just like are a disadvantageous financial setup. And so we'll actually not only end up seeing a system where more people are more comfortable participating, but actually just a healthier, more sustainable, incentive-aligned economic structure once privacy, becomes more popularized. Which is a great unlocks.
I have a question for you guys. Actually, do you think people will use DeFi more if there's privacy aspects? Do you think like the use of DeFi is going to like skyrocket pretty aggressively?
Actually, there's a really good chance to point to the contrary, depending on what level of like which privacy layer is being applied. Is it being applied on the trading aspect of it, the exchange / settlement / clearing, and the traditional concept of it, or is it some let's say order posting, like a liquidity definition or something like that? Like the smart way to do it, yes, it would definitely help a lot with the adoption, but so far there's no production solution for it. I think Espresso Systems might be working on something that kind of address this particular issue, because on one end you want to make sure that institutions and large players, aka size, feel safe about not getting sniped and not being targeted. You could do that in a pseudonymous way, but the surefire way is obviously having that layer of privacy. And then there's the other side, which is compliance. You don't want to have so much privacy that it ends up being tornado cash. And as a matter of fact, basically all those regulations and all those issues around USDT, USDC, blacklisting OFAC addresses, and the policy actually helped significantly with the DeFi adoption, because then it removes like a few layers of AML concern. So yeah, it's kind of like a catch-22 situation.
Yeah, I agree. I think there actually is room for after the whole tornado situation, we were thinking about different ways that how can we keep building privacy functionality into Osmosis. One of the things that we've thought about was maybe it's reasonable to actually, let's say you do have a tornado cash style shielded pool, but have a viewing key that's threshold sharded to all the validators, and then governance can vote to decrypt specific flows through the shielded pool. Why was Tornado Cash sanctioned? It's because North Korea sent $1 billion through it, right? And it's if North Korea stole $1 billion in a hack and then put it through a privacy solution on Osmosis, I'm pretty sure governance would want to decrypt that, right? I think there are cases where giving governance the ability to opt in and break things, but going through public transparent systems, not just single actors who can decide when to decrypt things. I think that is actually a pretty reasonable thing to do.
Yeah, that makes sense. I also really like Secret Network's approach to privacy by default. I feel like having a chain that defaults to privacy and just having different forms of disclosure makes a lot of sense and coincides with what Sunny talked about with governance determined reveal keys.
Yeah, I think over time we'll see the key is that we have the tool set that allows various apps, smart contracts to design their privacy, right? How intense do you want the privacy to be? And we'll have the full spectrum of that. And I'm sure at some point, as there's more regulatory clarity, you'll have the apps that are within line with the legislation. There'll be some gray area ones. And then of course, there's always going to be regulatory arbitrage that's performed. And that's part of the value add is the regulatory arbitrage. And I think the key from an industry standpoint is advocate for the fact that privacy is valuable, and we need to have the tooling that allows the full spectrum. And it's going to be up to the builders and the communities to then, conform to a tech stack that they're comfortable with in relation to wherever they operate out of, right? So we need to have that full range. I'm a firm believer in that. And I know that Secret Network in its vision for 2.0 will be pushing that. And I know that many other DeFi organizations also really care about this. And so I think over time, it will continue to play a more and more significant role. And right now, privacy is in kind of an odd, nuanced spot just in relation to Tornado Cash and a lot of the regulations that are coming out. And I'm excited for us collectively as an industry to continue to defend the utility and the value of privacy within decentralized finance.
I think like there's an extent to it. It's like in crypto, we've kind of like just sucked at marketing privacy. Like we've somehow made privacy seem like this big scary thing that like no one wants. I think in Web 2, they've done a good job at like marketing privacy as this amazing thing, like, user privacy, data privacy. Like everyone loves Apple because of their like focus on like user privacy as opposed to a lot of the other Web 2 giants. And it's like, I don't know. I feel it's just really like a branding thing that we have to, you go on Tornado Cash's site. It's like, we are an anonymity mixer. And it's like, what? That's not how you want to pitch this, right? Like focusing on like, like I said, I think like privacy is just actually just table stakes. If you want DeFi to like, privacy is there to protect users, right? Like we don't want people to be front run. We don't want people to be copy traded. Like this is how you build fair markets. There's also just like certain features you can't build without like privacy, right? Like how are you going to put stop orders on a DEX without like having some sort of privacy system, right? Otherwise people are just going to stop loss hunt. So it's like we need to like figure out like how we rebrand and pitch privacy. And I actually think the Secret Network folks have actually done like a good job at doing that.
Yeah, I think the key is to be focused on commerce. Like when you go to the grocery store and you swipe your card, the cashier doesn't know your bank balance, right? Like there's very basic examples where privacy is so intuitively, intimately already integrated into everyday life and commerce. And we just need to point out the fact that like, if you want commerce to be transitioned to Web3, where the security is better, the interchain security of the world, all those different promises that we're building out here, the decentralization, the immutability, then like you have to have a layer of privacy or commerce can't thrive here. And it's interesting because DeFi is such a power user-esque thing. And I think we need to use language with simpler examples. And of course, we can bridge it back to DeFi, but focusing on the commerce, focusing on the fact that we're just trying to bring parity to what already exists in Web 2. So that would be my angle. So that being said, I think that was a really good coverage on privacy. We have around 6 to 7 minutes left, and so I kind of want to pose a challenge question because I always like when we can see a little bit of friction, a little bit of pushback. Within Cosmos, there's this thesis of interoperability, which tends to trend towards collaboration. And in the middle of a bear market or at the peak of a bull, you see the intensity of competition. So my question for you guys is DeFi PvP, and what does collaboration actually mean if that is the case?
I think that like a little bit of both, right? Like, I mean, I think to some extent DEXs, like let's say DEXs specifically, like they do compete on like volumes, but I also think like they also like sort of specialize over time, right? Like different, like in traditional markets, you don't have commodities traded on the same exchange as like securities that's traded as the same exchange as like, I don't know, like options. I think like DEXs figure out what their niche is, and it's like just how you have a proliferation of multiple centralized exchanges, you have proliferation of multiple DEXs. They're competing, but then at the same time they're just sort of growing the overall ecosystem as a whole. So yeah, and I think like there's a lot of like composability, like things that they can work together on, right? Like DYDX is a DEX on Cosmos, but like we're working with them to like provide them stable swap functionality so that they can like bridge USDC from their Ethereum users into like Cosmos native USDC. And so it's like examples like this of like there's ways that you can find ways to work together.
Yeah, I think the general ethos of Cosmos is really the network effect of IBC. there's this one thought that, Bitcoin's like a calculator, Ethereum's like a computer, Cosmos is like a network of peer-to-peer connected computers. And network effect is definitely the goal of the Cosmos ecosystem. That being said, I think like different Cosmos chains are likely going to have their specializations. For example, Umee is specialized in borrowing and lending, and in order to focus on borrowing and lending, just different aspects need to be optimized. And so I think when it comes to different types of DeFi use cases, there is going to need to be a focus on certain competitive natures of a protocol, what they do to ensure safety, how customizable they are, how they compete on just making sure that the protocol is as solvent as possible with as little bad debt. So in that aspect, I think there is a level of competition, but the key to DeFi, the key to all this is really composability and interoperability. I mean, I don't think the future of crypto is going to be defined by locked TVL, like TVL that just stays in one place. I think the future of crypto and DeFi is going to depend on volume and liquidity and just two-way streets, volume that flows between different ecosystems. And I think that's also the basis of IBC. Like when do you see an IBC transaction just occur and just nothing else happens afterwards? Generally, when you look at like map of zones, you look at the IBC volume, and I think that's key to defining the success of a lot of these protocols. So, yeah, somewhat in agreement. It's both collaborative as well as competitive in some aspects.
I agree with everything that's been said, right? There's going to be a bunch of different players that all, have their niche and have the thing that they're really, really good at. The other thing that is always important to kind of take a step back and remember is that Cosmos is a fraction of crypto volume right now. And, crypto is a tiny, tiny, tiny fraction of, institutional capital volume. And so the best thing that we can all spend our time doing is figure out, if we get those fractions to increase, we all win at the end of the day. And that's really the number one priority, right? How do we get EVM liquidity in? How do we get additional capital and how do we create the right applications that will, bring the big institution, the big money into Cosmos and as an ecosystem?
I think another really important component is just how modularized every single like the architecture of Cosmos SDK to begin with. So if there are isolated modules that are useful for some other projects and stuff like that, there's more eyes on it. There's more security coverage on it. There's more auditing on it. So I think anything that you try to do or anything that you try to build yourself, it end up serving the benefit to the others as much as the others will serve you. And I think that is probably the most important thing and why it's so much safer and so much smoother to build within the Cosmos ecosystem.
Yep.
I like that. I like that collective answer. It's essentially trend towards specialization, but ultimately we're all collectively focused on creating a network effect that grows the Cosmos pie, grows the Cosmos ethos and vision. I'm doing a quick time check here. I guess we have a couple few minutes left. So maybe what we can close with is for each of you, we'll go one at a time. What is your kind of protocol roadmap? What are you most excited for in 2023? Just kind of give you the chance to kind of look into the camera, talk to the audience, get 60 to 90 seconds, and then that's kind of how we'll round things out. I think it was a wonderful discussion overall, and just give you a chance to vision cast where things are headed for your respective protocols. Quick.
So from my end, I would say that for 2023, we're looking forward to optimize, customize borrowing and lending for longer tail assets. So assets that generally you wouldn't be able to use as collateral. I think that there are ways to add historical pricing to basically dampen some of the price movements. Basically, everything we saw with Avi Eisenberg and everything he did on Mango markets and subsequent borrowing and lending protocols, I think they can be solved with customizable oracles and ways to prevent some of those hacks. So some of those exploits. So I'm looking forward to seeing innovation on that side.
I can go. Next 6-9 months, most exciting thing for us is to get live. Right, we're gonna go up and running. We're gonna start transacting volume, and we're super pumped about that. And then I guess kind of, following soon from there, I think we're really excited about the power, bringing an ability to Cosmos to go create custom curves, financial products, new types of innovations around the AMM and financial product space within the Duality ecosystem. And we're really excited about the work that we're doing internally around MEV and how MEV and how new innovations in MEV can lead to more sustainable economies in DeFi in general, but also Cosmos specifically.
Yeah, Wormhole just deployed today, so that was pretty cool on Injective. And a lot of things to look forward to. I think overall in the ecosystem, USDC native, that's always going to be really, really cool. It solves a lot of headache for sure. ICS, asset issuance chain, the kind of like really reinforcing and driving home on the app-chain thesis by making, creating a new chain and the barriers to entry so much lower. And yeah, just like, it's the only, sector, or it's the only kind of like ecosystem out there that has a lot of exciting things, to look forward to, rather than, being worried about like external contagion risk.
Yeah, for me, I would say probably near term, probably like Osmosis's order books, probably like in like February or something. And then other than that, I think probably the thing I'm most excited for is like threshold decryption going live. Like, it's been sort of a long time coming, but like a lot of the pieces are finally starting to like fall into place that definitely will be live next year. And so excited for that.
It's awesome. On Shade side, we have Silk, the stablecoin, launching sometime in the next 30 to 60 days, hopefully, and some DEX and lending related stuff too. So it's gonna be a fun time.
Need more stable coins.
Yes, stablecoin liquidity in all of its form. Well, I think this was an excellent panel overall. That rounds out the state of privacy in a DeFi world. Be sure to follow Ron, Brent, Sunny, and Eric on Twitter. Follow their protocols. Get involved in their community. It's going to be a very exciting 2023 for all of Cosmos. I think the building blocks have been set, and now builders are really starting to sink their teeth into what's possible here. And I think 2023 is going to be the actualization of a lot of the potential.